Hi, everybody. This is Mayank, and welcome to the channel. On this channel, we are going to be speaking about how you can plan your travel, and specifically, this video is going to be about your travel to the beautiful country of Switzerland. I have been to Switzerland along with my wife, and I believe that it is a great destination to be. And for this destination, basically, there are some basics that you will have to keep in mind before we start this video. One is your passport needs to have 6 months of validity after your date of return. Second, in Switzerland, they don't accept the euro. They work on the Swiss franc. So you will have to have a few Swiss francs with you apart from your credit cards and debit cards, things like that. And also, obviously, you'll need to have a valid Schengen visa for this. Okay, so let's get started. So, what is the first step that you need to take uh, before you plan your travel to Switzerland? You need to know when is the best time to travel to Switzerland. The most popular time is the summertime, that is from June to August. That's when most people travel to Europe and to Switzerland in general. So you can either plan to go in the summer, but there are some disadvantages and advantages with that. Advantages are that the sunlight is there, so you can travel pretty much from you know morning to late night, and you would have sunlight to support that. The second advantage that you might get is the landscapes are a little more beautiful at that time, more greenery, etc. So you might get that advantage. The disadvantages of the summer are that usually the crowds are huge, especially Switzerland being such a favorite destination of so many people around the world. They will all travel there, and it's going to be quite crowded. So if you're okay with that, it it works for you, right? The second disadvantage of traveling during that time is the cost. As you know, Switzerland is one of the most expensive countries, not only in Europe, but I guess across the world. So going there in the summer is going to be, even more costly. I would say even 30% more costly than going there in a shoulder month. The second time that you could choose to go to Switzerland is during the winters. During the winters, obviously, you might get a few of the holiday crowd, the Christmas crowd, or the New Year crowd during that time, but it won't be as crowded as the summer. Advantages of traveling to Switzerland in the winter would be, it would turn into a winter wonderland, as they say. Everything will be white, and wherever you go, you can see snow. And we being from India, we don't get to see the snow a lot, except if you live in the Himalayas, is different. But usually, we don't get to see a lot of the snow. So for us, that is a really a different experience, I would say. So that is an advantage of going during the winter time, right? Also, prices might be a little cheaper than the summer, but it'll be still high because I mean this is Switzerland, right? Uh, some of the disadvantages of going in the winter again might be the same thing. It might be too cold for our liking because, for example, I'm from Bangalore, right? So we don't get that kind of a cold climate or cold weather. So bearing that kind of minus, sub-zero temperatures are going to be is going to be a challenge, and you have to be well prepared for that, right? And we'll be talking about a few things that you can do to prepare yourself for these kind of weather conditions. But I think winter can also be a good time to go. Now let's come to my preference. Personally, my preference is to go in the off season, or it's also sometimes called the shoulder months. So anywhere between, let's say, start of April to about mid May is a good time to go. And we'll be speaking about the advantages and disadvantages a little later. The second best time I think to go is maybe, let's say, mid September to, let's say, mid October to end of October. That's also one of the off seasons or shoulder seasons, right? So, what are the advantages of going during these months, right? The advantages of going these months, as per whatever I've experienced, because I've always gone in the off season or shoulder season. Advantages are one, lesser crowds, much lesser crowds than summer. Uh, so it's easier to travel to. Let's say you want to see a famous site in Switzerland. The crowds there will be much lesser, so you'll be standing in line much lesser. You will get to see things quicker, and you can do much more in your day, right? So that's number one. The second advantage of the off season is that, of course, prices are going to be much lower. I have reserved hotels and things like that at let's say 30 to 40% cheaper than peak times. So it really does help, right? Um, what are the disadvantages of the shoulder season, right? So there are some disadvantages. Obviously, the disadvantage could be that certain sites are under maintenance, so they might be closed. Like Switzerland has a lot of these cable cars and things like that, which take you up to the mountains and back down. That might be closed, so you may not be able to access certain mountains, that are there. So these are some of the disadvantages here. The next part is to talk about what is the kind of itinerary that you can plan, right? So number one is, how many days do you want to travel to Switzerland for in specific, right? So depending on the other countries that you might be visiting during this trip, um, you know, let's say if you have a 2 week vacation, you've planned a 2 week vacation to Europe, then you can keep Switzerland to 7 to 8 days. And if you're doing a trip only to Switzerland, then probably I would suggest you could even do about 10 days. You won't get bored. It's a beautiful country with a lot of places that you could visit. So definitely you can visit for 10 days if it's a trip just to Switzerland. um, so what is the itinerary that me and my wife followed? Let me tell you. So we arrived to Zurich, uh, which is the biggest city in Switzerland. No, it's not the capital of Switzerland, it's the biggest city. We came from Paris by train to Zurich, and then at Zurich we stayed at the uh, Hotel Hilton, which is in Limmatal. I think it was a beautiful hotel. I could really recommend that. You can book yourself into it. Have a look at it, maybe on Booking.com. I think it's a wonderful hotel. Again, it's not a 5 star, but I'd say it's as good as a 5 star, right? So you definitely can stay at this hotel. The rates were pretty good. We'll talk about budget towards the end of this video, but I can tell you it was worth the money that we spent on it. Uh, at Zurich, what are the things that you can do, right? And how long do you want to stay in Zurich? Because the real beauty of Switzerland is more in the villages and smaller towns rather than the bigger towns of Switzerland. So I would say give Zurich a couple of days. Let's say if you arrive early in the morning, you can just go off to Bahnhofstrasse. Bahnhofstrasse is basically, Bahnhof means train station and Strasse is street. So this means station street or whatever, right? So you can go here. It has all the big brands when it comes to either watches or clothes or general shopping, basically. So if you want to do some luxury shopping, you can do it at Bahnhofstrasse. Bahnhofstrasse is about, I would say, about a 1.5 kilometer kind of street, and it leads up to the Zurich Lake. When you reach the Zurich Lake, you can also take a lake cruise on that. If you have the Eurail pass or the Swiss pass, you will get a good amount of discounts on this cruise. You can do that. It's about a 1 hour cruise. It'll take you around the different stops of Zurich Lake, and you will get a general sense of how Zurich looks from the water. I think it's definitely something that I'd like to recommend that you do, definitely. So you could do the lake cruise. You can walk around Bahnhofstrasse. That will take you at least, let's say, 3 hours to do. Right? You can spend. One thing that I'd really recommend to do in Zurich is visit the Lynn Chocolate Factory. That's what we had done. Um, I had never been to a chocolate factory before in my life, so I think quite a different experience. It has one of the largest chocolate fountains in Europe over there, so you can visit that. You might want to book tickets in advance because sometimes I've heard that these tickets get sold out, especially if you go in the summer months. It might get sold out, so you might want to book the tickets in advance. The second thing that I'd really recommend in Zurich, something that I really like, was you might have heard of the chocolate brand called Lindt. So Lindt has this kind of sister company, you can call it, called Sprungly, which makes cakes and pastries. So there is a Sprungly shop on Bahnhofstrasse. You can visit there, and I'm sure you're gonna like having those cakes and pastries, especially if you have a sweet tooth like me, right? So you can do that. um, After a couple of days, you can leave Zurich, and I'd recommend that you can travel to Interlaken. Interlaken is where a lot of Indians do visit. So you'll see a lot of Indians there, and you can make friends. Um, Interlaken is more like a kind of a one-stop shop to travel to all the beautiful villages, around it. So villages like Lauterbrunnen, villages like Wengen, like Kleine Scheidegg, like Grindelwald are all close by, about 20 minutes, half an hour by train. So you can visit these places, staying in Interlaken. Interlaken, yes, it is a little touristy, but I think that is the best option unless you want to stay in the mountains. You want to stay in Lauterbrunnen or Wengen. Then yes, keeping in mind weather conditions again, you can also do that. What are the things to do in Interlaken? One is you have the Casino Kursal. So if you're interested in visiting the casino, you could do that. The casino also houses the statue of Mr. Yash Chopra, who's made Interlaken and Switzerland, I would say, famous among us Indians. So you can visit the statue. There's a bronze statue of him present there in that park. You can walk on the main street there. There's Hotel Victoria. That's a really heritage hotel, a really old hotel there. You can see that there are a couple of DDLJ, the movie DDLJ shooting spots. So you can also see that. And the best thing about that street is that you can look at Jungfrau right from that street. Jungfrau, as you know, is the called top of Europe. It's a glacier, basically, which we will be talking about a little later. So you can definitely visit, or you can see the Jungfrau right from the main street in Interlaken. So you can visit Interlaken the day you arrive in Interlaken. You can spend your time in Interlaken. Good thing about Interlaken is that there are a lot of Indian restaurants there. So if you're craving Indian food, definitely do visit. The hotels in the restaurants in Interlaken. What we did the day we arrived to Interlaken is we went to this mountain called Harder Kulm. Hardakulm basically is a I would say a small mountain where you can visit the top on a kind of I could call it a train, a mini train, where you can go up. You need to purchase a ticket for this, obviously, and you can go up and just see the views. You can see Lake Thun on one side, Interlaken in between, and Lake Brienz on the other side. And I think, especially for my wife, I think that was the highlight of the travel to Switzerland. She really liked it, so I could definitely recommend that you can go there. There are a few restaurants on top, so if you want to have something to eat or a drink, you can do that at the top as well. The next day from Interlaken, what we did is we visited the villages of Lauterbrunnen. Lauterbrunnen is also called the Valley of the 72 Waterfalls, although we saw only four. But I'm sure if when the snow melts, there might be 72 waterfalls that you can also see, right? Uh, Lauterbrunnen is just out of this world, and brilliant to walk into. but there's also Trommelback waterfalls. So this waterfall is pretty unique because it's one of the few waterfalls that falls within the mountain, inside the mountain, unlike other waterfalls which fall from the edge of the mountain towards the outside, right? So this is really unique. You can visit that. Um, After Lauterbrunnen, you can catch the train and go up to this village called Wengen. Wengen is also one of the most beautiful, villages that I have seen. You can clearly from Wengen, you can clearly see the, Jungfrau in front of your eyes, and not only the Jungfrau. On the either side of Jungfrau is the Monk and the Eiger, so you can see these three mountains very clearly. Apart from that, I mean, there are n number of mountains that you can see in the distance, but these three are really close by. You can also walk around in Wengen. I think it's a very beautiful village. When we went there in the month of April of 2023, it was really, really empty. There was hardly anybody there, so you had enough time to kind of walk around and things like that. There's also a coop there where you can buy groceries, or you can buy your lunch, maybe a sandwich, and sit there looking at the Jungfrau Monk. So I think that is what you could do in Wengen. There is also a church at Wengen, and you can easily find out it's the only church there. So you can ask one of the locals where the church is. Near the church, there is a bench where you can go and sit, and you will actually see the Lauterbrunnen Valley, down below right from there. So that's a beautiful view too. So you can also do that. Next, we were planning to go to Kleiderscheiding also, but due to time constraints, we thought it's better to return to Interlaken. So that's what we did. Now, one mistake that we made was, we came back to Interlaken pretty late, and all the buses had, shut down for the day, and so we had to find one bus that was going kind of, some distance, and then we had to walk to our hotel, which is about, an half an hour, 40-minute walk, and it was getting dark. So please avoid that. Come back, well in time. See the schedules of the bus, or you can even ask at the bus station, what is the last bus to your hotel. So do that so that you don't get stuck like us. So the next day, we actually left Interlaken. I believe we could have spent one more day there and probably made it to Grindelwald. But we had our marriage anniversary, our 10th marriage anniversary, and we had to get to this town called Zermatt, which is about, I would say, about 3.5 hours from Interlaken. So we took a train, and we went to Zermatt that day. Reached somewhere mid afternoon, and Zermatt is basically a ski town. It's really high up in the mountains, and I think probably the second best after Lauterbrunnen. Beauty was just amazing. So we went to Zermatt, and one thing very unique happened there is, for the first time in both our lives, we saw snow falling from the skies, and that was the most beautiful, unique things that happened. We've seen snow before in Himachal, but it was all snow on the ground. This is the first time that we saw snow falling from the heavens. So that was absolutely breathtaking, exciting. So I'll try and put a few pictures here of that. So that was brilliant, and this was the month of April. Remember that. So it's not like it's winter, and that's why it's snowing. It just snowed because the altitude was. So that was Zermatt, and the reason we went to Zermatt is this: there is this very famous train ride that we wanted to do. It's called the Glacier Express, and the next day was actually the 21st of April, which is our anniversary, our marriage anniversary. So early morning at about 8 o'clock, we woke up and we took the Glacier Express to Chur. This train actually goes from Zermatt to St. Moritz. It's about an 8.5 hour kind of journey. It's one of the slowest express trains in the world, is what it's called. We did not go all the way to St. Moritz because then our plans would not fructify. So we actually got down in Chur, and then from Chur we went back to Zurich. So So that was the itinerary that we followed. This took us about 7 to 8 days to complete. And I think that is a good itinerary. You get to see the center of Europe, the west of Europe on this. Of course, there are many, many other places that I can recommend, but then I've not personally done it, so I will speak about it only when I do it. Now, coming to the last part of this video, which is obviously the budget. Like I told you, Switzerland is one of the most expensive countries in the world. So you might, want to know what it cost us to travel. Of course, everybody's budget is going to be different, but I will go ahead and tell you, give you an idea about, the kind of expenses that we incurred on this trip, right? So number one is your flight tickets, which are going to be pretty expensive. Post the pandemic, air ticket prices have gone up by about 30%. So, the tickets that we purchased cost us about 60,000 for a return ticket. So for a couple, obviously, that's going to be 1,20,000 rupees, right? The next and probably the most expensive thing is booking hotels. Let's say if you're going on a 8-day trip or a 10-day trip, and you're going to be spending anywhere between 12 and 15,000. We took hotels which were about 15,000 a night on average. So that costs us another 1,20,000 in Switzerland, right? The next thing is obviously the visa that you have to do in advance. For the visa, you would spend about 30,000 rupees as a couple, including the fees that VFS charges you, etc. It's going to be about 30,000 for a couple, right? The next part is your internal transport within Switzerland. A lot of it does get covered in the Swiss pass if you have one, but we didn't have a Swiss pass. We had an EU rail pass, but that also did help us. But we did incur an additional transport cost in 8 days of about, let's say, 30,000 rupees. So that's the next. And the next is also we purchased the EU rail pass, like I mentioned. So we took a first class EU rail pass. Don't really need to go for a first class. There is not much of a difference between the first class and the second class in Europe, except that you might get a little bigger seats, a little more luggage space, etc. And the interiors might be a little more luxurious in the first class, but otherwise, the second class is good enough. But keeping in mind that we purchased a first class Eurail pass, it was a 7-day pass, so there are various passes available. You can check into how many days you're going to be traveling during your trip to Switzerland, and accordingly you can purchase. But our pass cost us about 28,000 rupees, right? So that's the cost. As far as the total goes for the trip to Switzerland, I would say it would cost you between, let's say, 4,10,000. That's what we spent in Europe, sorry, in Switzerland. But again, depending on your budget, anywhere between 4 to 5 lakhs is what you should plan for as a couple. So with that being said, we come to the end of the video. If there are any comments you want to make on this, what I could do better, if I've missed any information, or you want any particular information, do feel free to comment below, and I'll be more than happy to answer. I look forward to your comments and feedback on what I can do better, and how this would help you a little.